without any further ado, I am delighted to introduce a woman who needs no introduction, Ginny Marvin. Ginny has brought a width and breadth of experience from events and being on the outside into Google to be the Google Ads liaison. And we have collected some fantastic questions to put to Ginny. And it's important to note Ginny is not here to sugarcoat anything. She's here just to bring understanding. So I ask that any questions that come through come from a place of empathy and kindness, and that we all are here to understand all things. And yeah, so without any further ado, Ginny, I'll kick it over to you for a brief introduction, and then we'll get into the questions.
Great. Hi. Thanks so much, Navah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I should just look in the stream. Hold on. I didn't realize I was on camera either, but I was like, thanks so much for having me. This is really great and fun to be here in this ads liaison capacity. Even though I'm coming up on, actually, I think I'm about 2 years in right now. It still feels like relatively new to me. So I am really thrilled to be here, and thank you in advance to everyone for the questions that you submitted over the last couple of weeks. So we'll dive in.
One question I actually really am excited for us to dig into, because there have been a lot of changes and a lot of innovations, is I would love your take on on spot on and maybe some not quite right ideas around those updates and innovations. I know you are fantastic at responding to pretty much all of us when we put something out there. I know I had the comment about search partners and search with display select, and you were 100% on about the image extension. There's also the conversation about similar audiences. So I would love your take on what are some of those updates that are maybe have some misconceptions and correcting them, and what are some really spot on takes you've seen?
Yeah, I think so. I know some of the a few of the recent changes or updates that have caused some questions are, I know, so content targeting, there have been some changes around the targeting that we're doing, making available for display and video. And so there have been two recent ones. One was just recently announced, but the one that was just announced recently was the we're not going to be supporting and functions within content. So what we were seeing is a lot of people assumed that these were or functions, and that it was working with an or function. And so we're getting tripped up. And so there was confusion, also low usage. So that combined made us decide to let's just do away with that. But I will say that if you are among the few that loved content combinations, is to note that we do support and logic when you layer on audiences, and when you're doing targeting audiences, not an observation, and devices and location. So you may find that there are ways to work in that layering to kind of support what you were doing on the combinations. And then the other one was on that front was to phase out contextual targeting for keyword and topic for video action campaigns. And again, this is an area where we just saw more confusion and unintentional restricting of their of advertisers' campaigns than they probably intended to, and we see better performance when we just remove that targeting.
And I think that's a really important point to hone in on, is that when some of these changes happen, it's reviewing what are we doing and what are the results that we are experiencing. So low usage of something, that might say that, hey, if we're now throwing a fit that we don't have it, maybe we just weren't aware of how to access it. It's not that Google was trying to take it away; we just weren't using it. And same thing with results, that we were not seeing positive results when the thing was in place. So there are always hedge cases. There's always going to be that one person that has that amazing result, but when the lion's share have one piece, it definitely is worthwhile.
Oh, good. That's good to hear, Brad. I see Brad's note because I know, and Brad was one of the folks I know was using content combinations. So that's good to see. I'm happy to see 40%. We'll hopefully can get further ahead of that. But yeah, I mean, that really is important, is that a lot of these, changes, deprecation shifts they're not penalized. They're not
Yeah.
right. And so often they just either aren't working as initially intended or as expected, and or have low usage. So yes, there's always usually a number of underlying reasons for changes.
There was a question that came in that speaks to another question that had come in previously from John Denuzio and it was actually to Jill, but I'm going to pull it into this and then we'll go through of go-to tactics to improve quality score. But there was another question that actually came through around explaining ad rank thresholds and their purpose. And I'm personally am actually very intrigued here because it's very interesting that sometimes ad rank and quality score can be very, very different from account to account. You'll run this effectively the same exact structure, but it'll be slightly different. So would love your take on how ad rank really plays out and some of those go-to strategies.
Yeah, so on the ad rank threshold, so I had responded to Kirk Williams earlier this week, I believe. He had some thoughts on ad rank thresholds, and I wanted to just clarify a little bit about how they work and what their purpose is. So ad rank thresholds, you can think of them as bid rank, bid floors, right? So minimums to be able to either appear in the auction at all, but they're also ad rank thresholds for appearing at the top of the search results versus the bottom of the search results pages. They've been around for ages, and so the last time there was a big update to ad rank thresholds was in 2017 to allow it to then consider the query category. So that can be anything from thinking about is this a news related query? That bid floor obviously is going to be much higher because there don't tend to be, we don't tend to monetize news queries. Or is it a product research query, right? It's going to show high intent, consumer intent. Or it may be different topics. So I think there's an example of wedding venue related keywords versus, basket making. So probably the wedding venue is going to have a higher threshold because the auction is going to be more competitive. If that makes sense? So the things that I want to make sure that people understand is that ad rank thresholds are dynamic and they are designed to determine the minimum quality and relevance requirements for an ad to show, again, at the top, bottom, or at all. So it's sort of that initial threshold for determining if you are going to be competitive in the auction. And it's really determined on what the relevance of that ad is. And then there's some other factors, obviously. So then if you look more broadly at ad rank, those factors are going to be the quality signals that we see in quality score are going to be impacting into ad rank.
So I'm probably being a little bit mischievous, jumping up and down our question document. But one of the questions that I'm really keen to make sure that you have the time that you can speak to, again, to the extent that you can, with cookies being phased out. And a lot of that privacy first web functionality really it's here. What are some changes that we advertisers can expect to see within Google Ads, interface wise, policy wise? Are there certain verticals that might have to look to other channels? Are there certain verticals that are going to be able to come into the Google advertising fold? Would love any insights you can share there.
Yeah, I think, so more broadly speaking, so work on Google Ads and Google Analytics to essentially future proof for the sunset of third party cookies has been underway for a number of years. Google Analytics 4 really, it already is privacy is built into it and doesn't rely on third party cookies. It was built with modeling and data driven attribution embedded into it, and really is part of that future looking way to make sure that we are providing a analytics platform for the future that doesn't have to rely on cookies. But it also enables advertisers to take full advantage of their first party data as well, which, as we all know, is becoming more and more important in this new privacy landscape. And so the other thing I would add is data driven attribution being the default in Google Ads as well. And so data driven attribution, or DDA, trains on real conversion paths and then also, but uses machine learning to measure and model the conversion credits across touch points, even when cookies are missing. So the foundation has been being worked on for a long time in both from an analytics standpoint and in ads. And then I think, as you'll recall, we announced that we're going to be phasing out similar audiences. And that's that last fall. That's going to happen this year. Again, that is a moving away from a reliance on third-party cookies, and we're going to be focusing more on solutions like optimized targeting. So that is for if you're running discovery, display, and video action campaigns. Optimized targeting is something you're going to want to look at. And audience expansion for video reach and consideration campaigns. And then smart bidding is another big piece. So if most people here are probably using some form of smart bidding, and that already uses your audience lists and also now uses signals from your customer match lists to reach both from a customer match list, your existing customers, but also find similar customers as well.
And I'm really glad you made that point, because initially when the update came out, I was very distraught because that was a tactic that I really enjoyed using. Was similar audiences was a really viable way to prospect using your existing folks. And it's important to remember that sometimes when a targeting option is deprecated, it's not gone, it's just being rolled into other things. So one of the pieces that we may just now see is that smart bidding is a little bit more mandatory than maybe it would have been before. But I'm actually, this wasn't on the list, but it came up because you mentioned data-driven attribution. The thresholds for data-driven attribution used to be pretty high for a smaller advertiser or for a newer advertiser. An established one, an enterprise, it's fine. They'd be fine. But with so much moving towards what used to be enterprise level thresholds, either for conversions so that the algorithm would work, or for data-driven attribution for target or for reporting. How accurate is it, and how useful is it for the accounts where there isn't as much data?
That's a really good question. Yes, so the models have definitely gotten much, much better so that we don't need as much data. But what happens when if there isn't enough data and you're set to DDA, it'll essentially default to it's the model closer to last click. So
Okay.
it will adapt if there's not enough data in there for the full modeling.
I'm selfishly going to bring this up because I do a lot with local service ads, and I don't think local service ads get enough attention. Greg asked the really good question of, will local service ads ever be rolled into the traditional Google Ads form? I also bring this up because I noticed there was a really good Twitter conversation talking about potentially spam and the rise of spam. And sometimes it's a legitimate concern, and sometimes it's just a matter of setting. So I'd love if you could speak to any updates or things you know about local service ads. Realizing this was one that just came in now.
Yes. So, Greg, great question. And I'm writing it down. So I don't have anything to announce or add on that front now in terms of it getting brought into the ads platform, but I will bring that back to the team. And on the issue of spam, this is an area where the team is deeply focused and has been making putting a lot of work into. And so I know that it is a concern, and that just know that it's taken really seriously internally.
So going back to the question of conversions, there was a really great question that came through around B2B versus B2C, and whether conversion values or maximize conversion value or maximize conversions is better suited. And it comes from that, I guess, hesitation that some brands have about committing to a conversion value. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, so I think it's a super good question. And I think it's something that a lot of B2Bs or non commerce
Yeah.
transaction folks struggle with, and or are really starting to take a new look at. So what I would say with value-based bidding is the extent to which you start experimenting with it will kind of depend on the capabilities that you have. So what I would suggest first is, if you can take advantage of offline conversion imports, that to be able to bring in transaction specific values for your sales, that's the kind of ideal way to start. But if that's not possible, there's also ways to calculate to help you gauge the average value of a specific stage in your conversion funnel. And actually, if I can I'm going to pop this link in the YouTube. We'll see if this works. I think I'm going to, yeah. So that link will bring you to a page that will walk you through a conversion value calculator. And so if you, and I think oftentimes, we have different values for each stage of the funnel, right? So like your initial touch point is not going to be as valuable, say, a download is not going to be as valuable as a demo. But what this calculator can help you do is map out that funnel, plug in your conversion rates that you see, and then it'll assign an average value. And so that is a place to start if you don't have actual transaction value data to bring in. The other thing I'll note, I'm going to also link to this best practice guide, just to extra call it out. It is linked to at the bottom of that value-based calculator page. But the link I just plugged in as well also has a deeper guide on this. So the best practice is, you don't want to be bidding simultaneously for different conversion actions that have different values. So you look at bidding towards the action that's closest to your final sale to start. And then that, of course, is the ideal. You're going to also need to have a certain number of conversions to make this
Reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes that lowest action is not going to give you, you're not going to have enough volume to be able to make that work. So you may have to go up a level or two, but again, keep that in mind. And then you're also going to want to think about time. You need to give this time to learn. So once you've assigned a value to your conversion action, we recommend, and you'll find this in that best practice guide, that you'll want to wait for 6 weeks before switching to a value-based bidding strategy. So you want to give the system 6 weeks to watch and learn and gather data before making any bidding strategy changes.
Yeah, that 6 week shout out. I hope everyone internalize that, cement it, because that is really, really important and helpful. And I think far too many accounts hurt themselves because they try to make too many changes or try to make decisions about outcomes with not enough time. So 100% the 6 weeks. I know we're coming close to the end of our appointed time, and I would be the absolute worst moderator if I didn't use this opportunity to talk to you about PMAX and get your updates on PMAX. There are a number of misconceptions. There are a number of rules of engagement. There are a number of celebrations and crying and all of that. I would really love your feedback on how we should think about PMAX in general, and then specifically how to think about audience signals, how to think about creative. And there was a really good discussion, I think actually Jill started, about whether PMAX was best suited for advanced versus beginner. So we might save that for when she comes back, but I would love to at least plant the seed of which you think it serves best, the beginner or the advanced. But we'll start with the audience signals and the mechanics.
Yeah, so audience signals, I think, is something that people get a little confused on, the signal piece versus the hard targeting. So audience signals are not used as hard targeting constraints. So that's really important to understand. These are used to help guide, inform the system, and speed up the learning. And if you put audience signals in that end up not working, the system will learn and essentially bypass your audience signals. So they are really your tool for being able to say, this is what I know about my audience. I have first party data. That's excellent use of audience signals. Custom segments are also can be really valuable for audience signals. And so, but really understanding what their purpose is to guide and help jumpstart that learning process. If you add an audience segment or an audience signal, and that what you should also know is that if your PMAX campaign's been running, you add a new audience signal, the system is not going to sort of override that
Learning.
Right? It's still going to know, okay, I'm finding conversions from these audiences here. I'm not going to divert my attention. I'm going to take that into account and see if there's other pockets of opportunity. So I think that's really important. And I would highly recommend, if you're just getting into PMAX, is spend some time kind of experimenting with the audience signals. And then in terms of creative, I guess what I would say is, if you have your own assets, add them in. We do recommend adding video when you have it. I know there's been a lot of consternation about auto-generated video. The one thing to note is that your own assets are being used for those videos. I know you may, from a brand safety or not safety, but brand suitability standpoint, may object to the designs. That's fine. But I would say the same thing with auto-generated content and broad match, that to be cautious of your assumptions. So that's the thing I continue to learn over and over again is broad match keywords that I didn't think would do well, auto-generated content, copy, didn't think would do well. I see it, I hear this so often of the surprise that people have, not always, but more and more on the from the content standpoint, I do hear that. So I would just be a little cautious of having a knee-jerk reaction to assuming how auto-generated content is going to perform.
Momo agrees. And I will say on a personal level, I have seen auto-generated content actually sometimes outperform the human content. And it's interesting because the content is essentially the same content that they had. They just weren't applying it maybe as intelligently as the algorithm. So if you are going to put the work in, your content will almost always outperform what the computer can, or what the algorithm can do. But that means putting the work in. That means actually thinking about who your personas, pulling in the video, the display, the text, and actually putting that effort in. If you're not going to do that, it's not that bad, and it actually can sometimes do well. Broad match, I actually think it may be shortchanged by being compared to the auto-generated content because I actually see broad match
Yes.
do even better things. And
Yes.
yeah.
No, I only say that because I just see the assumptions that people
Mm-hmm.
make
Mm-hmm.
on both sides of
I know.
that. Yes. And the other thing I would say is if you're seeing auto-generated content that you don't think is suitable, take that as a learning for and think about why is that content being recommended,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, what is there something you should be changing in your landing pages? Or there's some mismatch. If you really think that that is not relevant, then that is a good learning opportunity.
I we could honestly sit here and have an entire conference of just asking you questions and your amazing perspective.